free. Hi there friends, Miss Collins here again, and today we are going to start a little summer camp session. So this will just be a few videos that I'm posting throughout the summer in order to help you stay creative while at home. So the first project that's up is a weaving. Now if you had Miss Beto throughout the school year, then you might have done a weaving with her that looks similar to this. This sort of weaving is known as a linear weaving because the lines go straight across. These are usually built on a loom and then detached and hung similar to this. There are tons of videos online that show you step by step how to make a linear weaving like this, how to build your own loom and all of that sort of stuff. I will not be doing that today, but this is a good idea if you guys want to continue after you do today's project. What we are doing today is I am going to show you how to make a radial weaving. So the radial weaving is built on a circular hoop. This can be any sort of thing. I always use embroidery hoops, but you could also use bracelets or hula hoops or anything that has a very sturdy round shape. Now with this, you can't recycle the loom like you would with your linear loom because you have to keep it on here forever, but it is a really fun way and a really simple way to make a first weaving. So I'm going to start off by showing you how to make a very easy weaving like this. This is more of a dream catcher foundation. You can have different tassels and things hanging from the bottom, which end up being pretty cool. I'll show you all of that. And then I will also go into a little bit further detail and show you how to make one similar to this, where you can add different details to your weaving after you finish the actual shape. So you'll build the initial foundation and then you can go back in and kind of embroider some different details. It does not have to be just flowers. It can be initials or your favorite sports team or something like that. But I'm going to show you how to make both of these. So if you are interested in that, stick around and let's get started. Okay, so here on my workspace, I have everything you are going to need to make your own radial weaving. So first off, I always start with embroidery hoops. The only ones that I have currently available to me are some smaller ones. You can see the original ones I did were a little bit larger, but you can do the same kind of work on a smaller piece. It's just going to be a little tinier. The good thing about using embroidery hoops is that you get two looms out of these. So with one hoop comes these two circle shapes and you can put a different design on each hoop. That's exactly what I did with this. This was the outside layer of my hoop and this was the inside layer. So I got two weavings out of just one single embroidery hoop. Anyways, so you'll need one of these hoops to start for your first weaving. You're going to need a very sturdy, thin string. You could use any of these sorts of ones too. I just always like to start with a very thin layer as my base. So that will end up being the string that holds your piece. And you guys will understand this a lot more once I go through the details and instructions on that. But I like to use a smaller string as the base of my loom. Then you are going to also need a pencil just to mark where your strings are going to be. You have to use an odd number of spaces, so I like to mark those out with a pencil before I start. And I'll show you guys that in just a moment. You're going to need some scissors to cut any yarn or fabric that you're going to use, and then of course all of the yarn and fabric that you can find. When it comes to any fabric, what you can do is if you make a little cut in your fabric, depending on the sort of fabric that you have, you can just pull down that rip and then you'll have this nice thin even strip of fabric that you can weave into your weaving. So that's actually the material that I used right here. That's all the same kind of fabric, so that's an option as well if you're running low on any yarn or string. So that's it. Now that we have our materials are ready and lined up, let's get started on building our actual loom. Okay, so first thing I like to do with my hoop is I like to mark my lines. This is of course not something you have to do, but it just helps me kind of keep track of what I'm doing. So I need 9 lines to be on here. It doesn't have to be 9 exactly. 9 fits on these nice 3-inch hoops pretty well. If you have a larger hoop like this, I would recommend a bigger number. I think I used 19 or something like that on this. But whatever number you choose, it does need to be an odd number. That's going to help with your pattern whenever you start to weave it. So I just start with a mark up at the top, and then I'm going to think of kind of like a triangle coming off of this, and I'm going to put 2 lines like this. So right now I've broken up my circle into thirds. Then when I put 2 more lines into each of these thirds, it will give me 9 spaces. Of course, you can do it a little different. It doesn't matter exactly. I'm going to make this one here a little darker. That's going to show me where I start originally. So this will be my starting point when I start to weave. And then all of these will kind of follow suit. Now you can tell my lines are not exactly 100% even, but they'll kind of even themselves out as we start to weave. This is just a good starting point. So for your base string, you want something that's very sturdy. I like to use a smaller string like this. It needs to be strong enough to hold up your entire weaving, but thin enough so that it doesn't show up too much. This is going to be covered up by the other yarn that you actually use to weave, so this color isn't too important. If you see here, I use the exact same string on this piece that I did, and you can't really see it besides on the very edges. So keep that in mind when you are constructing your loom. I pulled off about 2 feet. That's probably more than I will need. What you're going to do is you are going to start at one of your lines that kind of cross throughout the middle. It could be here, it could be here, I could do anything as long as they are kind of splitting your circle. You want it to go across your entire hoop. So I'm going to line those up about there, flip it over, and then tie a knot. Now this may be something that you want to ask a grown-up to help with because this is holding up your entire weaving. You need it to be a pretty tight knot, so if this is something that you're struggling with on your own, please feel free to ask for help. Okay, so there's my initial knot. I've kind of swayed off of my lines a little bit, so I'm just going to kind of push those back into place like that. And then I'm going to continue to wrap the whole thing. So you're going to want to wrap across just like we did with the first one, but then I like to kind of loop this bottom one just to really secure it. So I'm going to loop through this Y that I've made back here before pulling it to another split. So kind of like this. It's not going to be totally even in the back, but we're going to tie them all together at the end. Loop it across here. I'm going to anchor it in my middle before looping it somewhere else. So I'll go here, loop it to this, and then my last one is here, and I can anchor the whole thing by wrapping my front to my back. So I'm going to stick it through the top. If you end up sticking it through the bottom first, that's totally fine. And I'm just going to wrap it so that I'm connecting my top piece to my bottom piece. You might want to go through some different entrances. You really just want to make it seem like the top and the bottom are now the same sort of shape. So if it got off at all, this is really going to help you kind of pull it back together. I'm going to use this tiny piece that I started off with to tie my final knot for my initial loom shape. Double knot, just to be careful. And then I can cut off the excess. So before you start any actual weaving at all, you want to make sure that you have something that looks similar to this. Make sure that you have 9. So this is my start. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or any other even number worth of little string spots, and then we can start our weaving. Now for my weaving, I'm going to be using this kind of mustard colored yarn that has seen much better days. I'm almost finished with it, and I just think it'll be a nice base. So I'm going to find an open spot. Typically if you look in the inside of your yarn, kind of at the little mouth, then you'll find a piece that you can pull and it doesn't get as tangled as if you're pulling the one from the side. So that's just a little crafter's trick. I'm going to pull off about 3 feet maybe. I'd rather have too much string than not enough. You can always add more if you need to, but I just like to start off with a bit of an excess. So you're going to go into the same spot that we made that knot to anchor everything in place, and you're going to attach another knot. So you're just connecting this mustard colored, or whatever color you guys have decided on, connecting that to your loom. I'm going to pull this small piece to the back just so I can use that to tie off anything else later, and then you're going to start your weaving process. And this is the fun part that gets really, really simple once you've practiced it. I'm going to pull this initial string through the top of this, Winfrey, please stop. So this will be where I'm first starting my weaving, and I want to go over this first string. Then the next string, I'm gonna go under. So if you see, I'm pulling my yarn underneath, but you're just gonna keep up this pattern. So if you look at my last one, I went underneath the string, so now I need to go over, then I'm gonna take it back under, then I'm gonna take it over, and I'm gonna pull through. If ever you get lost to where you are, you can just look at the string before. So this one, of course, I took my string over, so the next one I would need to take my string under. And you will just complete this pattern over and over and over again until your color runs out, or you decide you want to change colors, or until you get to the very end of your weaving. Always pulling pretty tight after you have weaved for a bit. Another tip I should probably show you guys is, instead of having to pull this very long string through every single time, if you wanted to, you could take the end of your string and wrap it around your fingers until you get all the way down to your weaving. And then you can just pass this little bundle through your string instead of having to pull it all the way through. You can just shove the entire little nugget through, and you'll keep this process up. It does get kind of messy, but it is a little bit more convenient than just pulling every single strand through. So you just keep up with the same thing over and under, but instead of pulling through with that long piece of string, you're just shoving this little yarn nugget back and forth. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue this weaving. I'm gonna do the entire thing yellow. So I would like to stop here and add a new color. So I am going to go next with, let's use this color. So I have a bit of this kind of burgundy yarn here, and all I'm going to do is tie it to my yellow. I'm going to chop both of my excess. Chop this. So my yellow is now finished. I can put that off to the side, and I'm going to continue on with the same process but with the burgundy colors. Going under, over, under, over, again and again and again. You can kind of hide the knot on the back side like has happened here. That way you're not seeing it in your weaving. Alright, I'm ready to try something new, so I am going to stop there, and I am going to actually use this fabric that I had showed you guys earlier. We're just going to tie our new material to our old material. And then I'm going to continue my weaving. Now with my fabric, I'm actually gonna do something a little different. I'm gonna tie it to itself. There we go. And then I'm gonna cut off this excess. Like that. And then this will just be like kind of a little bow that pops out of my weaving. Again, if you didn't like that, you could hide that on the back side, but I kind of like the way that these little sort of bow shapes turn out. Now that I haven't finished my weaving but I want to add another color, I'm just going to tie it to one of my white string that we started off with. Behind this knot that I made, I'm just going to put a stabilizing knot around one of these base strings, and that's just going to hold it there, and then I continue my process. So we'll say that's over, so we'll go under and keep on going. All right, I'm gonna add another color, attach our new yarn to our old yarn, double knot like that, and this guy as well. Perfect. Okay. This was over, so I need to continue under. right, I think that's good for that color. And then the one last thing I want to do is I have this really, really chunky yarn that I kind of want to use. So I'm gonna, I think I'm gonna tie this off. Maybe not cut all the excess off so that I can tie my chunky yarn into place, but I definitely want to go ahead and secure this color. So I'm just making a little knot around one of the strings here so that it doesn't really go anywhere. It's kind of stuck there so that my next yarn can go in its place. So this is what my super chunky wool strands look like. So I'm gonna pull off one of these and try to shove that into my final little gap that I have there. So I'm just going to shove my really thick yarn through that last opening I was in. I'm going to do the same thing that I've done with all the rest on the back, which is to tie it to my previous color just to give it something to kind of hold on to. Okay, so I'm going to keep going in the same way that I've done before, which is where I push my yarn through one way and then pull it back through the other. I think I have enough space to be able to fit one more layer of it in there. So that is my final weaving design. Pretty happy with that. It's really fun, lots of texture. I'm gonna try to base this last piece of white that I had, kind of try to tie that to something. Go, tie that down. I'm going to try to tie this blue color to this original yellow piece that I had just to make sure everything is anchored down before I cut off my last bits of excess. Okay, so now I can chop off all this extra. I can get rid of that yellow. I can get rid of this white and this teal. And then my weaving is complete. So you could leave it like this. You could just hang it on a wall just like it is. Or I always like to add some extra sort of embellishments. Like here I have this piece hanging from the inside. I'm going to actually show you guys how to hang some pieces from the bottom so that you get more of a dream catcher vibe. I'm going to use some of this dark gray that I had here. I am going to try and cut some of these tassel strings that are about maybe 8 inches or so. And so I'm just going to continue to pull out more and more string following about that size. Once you've done about 20 or so, then you're going to take one end and you're just going to chop all of those curved parts off. So you should be left with these individual pieces that have a hoop at one end and 2 pieces kind of down at the other end. You're going to take a little U shape like this, take a second U shape and lay it right on top. Let's do a third and see how that's looking. Third U shape. I think that'll probably be good for one of our tassels. So you're going to take the top of the rainbow up here, let's call this a rainbow line, and you have your little phrase down here, but you have the top up here, and you're going to take this loop that you have and you're going to shove it down through one of these openings. So I'm going to take that loop, I'm going to push it through to the back, and then I'm going to pull it just enough to take everything that's hanging on this side and put it through my loop. Then when you pull down, you should have a little hanging spot like that. But I'm going to do a few more of these hanging down. I think I'm also going to make some tassels out of the colors that I used in my piece as well. I don't think I went off and forgot about this guy. Now you can see I finished this yellow color, so my entire weaving all the way to the very edge is this yellow. On the back I attached my initial string to my final string, so I have this just very plain yellow weaving. But now I would like to attach some kind of design to this. Now, because you guys know I am always so partial to the flowers, and that is something I have some experience with, I am going to be making a flower shape, but you could of course do any kind of design that you wanted on this. Like anything else, it will take some practice, but it's all very, very easy once you get the hang of it. So I'm just going to be emulating this same kind of flower here. just because I've worked with those before. If you were curious, this is what the back of that weaving looks like. It gets kind of messy when you're adding different colors. What you're going to do is you're going to start off by taking your whatever color flower you want to have. I'm going to use what's left over of this white. I have just a little bit left. But you're going to take a looped piece like this. So it's kind of like the rainbow lines we used before. You're going to have a hoop at one end and 2 frays at the other. You're going to find a hole in your weaving, something kind of like that. You're going to take the hooped part, the top of the rainbow part, and you are going to pull that through. And on the other end where you have the frays, I'm just going to connect them to this base piece. So I'm going to tie my frays onto this, and this will be our kind of anchor. And then when I pull this guy through, it's going to kind of hold it in place. So I'll have something like that. Now you don't want to pull too tightly with any of these because you don't want to actually pull like a gap into your weaving. So I'm just going to pull gently, and I'm going to go straight across to another spot where I can make a little hole and shove that through again. Go around the back, pull my hoop through, and I have my first little set of petals, something like that. Then I'm going to continue the same thing. I'm going to find where I want my next petal to start. I'd say about here. I'm going to make a little hole, and then I'm going to pass it through the back. So I wouldn't want to go over because then that'll leave me with some white hanging over like this. I want to go through the back side, pull up, not too tight, and then again I'm going to go straight across. So I want my lines to make kind of an X in this case. It'll end up being more of like a star shape, which you could leave it as that too. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a flower. You could stop at the star shape. Take that hoop, shove it through, and pull. Now if you have any wiggly lines like this, I just like to pull them back out and kind of straighten them so that my petals are as thick as possible. Alright, I'm going to make one last set of petals going across here. So in the back, I'm going to find a spot where I want them to start. Take my little hoop on the back side, push that through, and then pull across like that. Okay, and then I think I can fit one more set of petals across here. Pop that guy through. Okay, and then finally, I will put my final petal across here. Pull it through the back. So I have something like that, just a very, very basic flower shape. And then I can anchor this to the back. So I'm going to chop my hoop, and I'm gonna just tie it to any spot that seems secure. My petal parts are pretty easy. Now the hardest part is going to be this little center bulb here. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to turn my piece over, and somewhere in the center, which is very, very tight from where we were weaving, I am going to have to push through a piece of this black yarn. So I'm just going to kind of dig a hole with some scissors. If you had a embroidery needle or a weaving needle or something like that, that would super come in handy, but I do not have that, so I'm just going to poke a hole through with my scissors because that is what I have. I'm going to try to push this black yarn through there. Very cool, just like that. Then I am going to take this black yarn, I am going to pull it almost all the way through, and then I'm going to find a loop, kind of like the loop we used before, and I'm going to make a knot very, very, very close to the loop. So my loop is right here, and I want to pull a knot that's very, very, very close to the end, but doesn't let that loop pop through. Alright, so something like that. I should have this tiny little knot at the end. So I'm going to pull this knot, and I want to align that knot with the center of my flower. Then I'm going to take the other side of my string, and I'm going to shove that back through my weaving on the other side. So take my scissors again, push a hole in the center of my weaving, make a divot there, take the end of my black yarn, shove it back through, and then pull. Now when I pull both sides of my yarn that are hanging out of the back, I should have a tight little knot, kind of like that. Push those petals back together. And then when I tie this on the back side, it should stay. Now this knot you do want to be pretty tight because you want it to stay right in place. So I'm gonna pull nice and tight. Double knot for good luck. And then trim off the extra. Awesome. And there we go. There you have it. A super easy way to make a very pretty little petaled friend. And because I don't know how to stop when I'm ahead, I did go in and add a few more embellishments to this piece. I haven't added a hanging string yet, but I did put a couple of our little tassels on here. I went in with one final strip of black just to add a little bit more of a border. But this is what I ultimately ended up with, and I wanted to share that with you. Thank you guys for joining me. Happy creating, stay very safe, and I will see you so soon. Enjoy the rest of your summer. Bye guys.